Sometimes the most profound moments happen in the most ordinary circumstances. When I agreed to paint Maria's bedroom, I thought I was just doing another job. I had no idea I was about to witness something that would change both our lives forever. This is the story of how a simple paint job became a journey of rediscovering beauty, worth, and the courage to see ourselves through someone else's eyes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Alex, and I'm 34 years old. I run a small painting and handyman business in Cedar Falls, a town where everyone knows everyone, and secrets travel faster than gossip at the local diner. It's the kind of place where your reputation follows you around like a shadow, and mine had been built on reliability, fair prices, and the ability to transform tired spaces into something that feels like home again. I've always been the guy who works with his hands, who finds peace in the rhythm of a paintbrush against a wall, who takes pride in leaving a room better than I found it. There's something almost meditative about painting, watching a space transform stroke by stroke, color by color. It's honest work, and after years of corporate jobs that left me feeling empty, I'd found my calling in bringing life back to forgotten corners of people's homes. My business, Cedar Falls Painting and Repair, wasn't making me rich, but it was making me happy. I worked mostly alone, except for bigger jobs where I'd bring in Sam, my buddy from high school, who'd been struggling to find steady work since the factory closed down. Sam was the kind of guy who could make you laugh even when you were having the worst day of your life, and he had this gift for making clients feel comfortable, like they'd known him for years instead of minutes. The work kept me busy, but it also kept me isolated. While other people my age were climbing corporate ladders or building families, I was climbing actual ladders and building a business one satisfied customer at a time. I'd been single for about 2 years, ever since Rebecca decided that dating a painter wasn't quite the life she'd envisioned for herself. She'd wanted someone with a steady paycheck, benefits, and a clear path to suburbia. I'd wanted someone who could see the beauty in what I did, who understood that there was dignity in manual labor and art in making someone's house feel like home. My best friend Jordan never let me forget about the dating situation. Jordan worked at the bank downtown and had made it his personal mission to get me back out there, as he put it. He'd show up at job sites with coffee and unsolicited advice about how I needed to put myself out there more, how I was too good at hiding behind my work. Jordan meant well, but he didn't understand that I wasn't hiding. I was just selective. I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who didn't appreciate what I brought to the table. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was finishing up a kitchen cabinet job for the Hendersons when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was soft, almost hesitant, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "Hello, is this Alex from Cedar Falls Painting? I got your number from Mrs. Peterson down the street. She said you did beautiful work on her living room." "Yes, that's me. What can I help you with?" "I need my bedroom painted. It's been the same color for far too long. I think it's time for a change." There was something in her voice that made me pause. It wasn't just about paint. Change rarely is, especially when it comes to bedrooms. That's the most personal space in anyone's home, the place where they're most vulnerable, where they start and end each day. When someone wants to change their bedroom, they're usually changing something deeper. "I'd be happy to give you an estimate. What's your address?" 1247 Maple Street. I'm Maria, by the way. Maria Santos. I knew the house. It was one of those charming older homes with character, the kind that had been built when people cared about details like crown molding and hardwood floors. I'd always admired it when I drove past, wondering about the people who lived there, what stories those walls held. "I can swing by Thursday afternoon if that works for you, Maria. Around 2 o'clock? That would be perfect. Thank you so much, Alex." Thursday arrived with that crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. I pulled up to 1247 Maple Street and took a moment to appreciate the house up close. It was even more beautiful than I'd remembered, with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees that were just beginning to turn gold. The kind of place that looked like it had been loved for decades. Maria answered the door before I could knock, as if she'd been waiting by the window. She was probably in her early 50s, with dark hair that was starting to silver at the temples, and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. She was wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans, but there was something elegant about her. Something that made me stand a little straighter. "You must be Alex. Please come in." The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside. Everything was immaculately clean, but there was a sadness to it, like a museum where no one was allowed to touch anything. Family photos lined the hallway, but they seemed to stop abruptly at a certain point, as if time had frozen somewhere in the past. "The bedroom is upstairs," Maria said, leading the way. "I hope you don't mind the mess. I've been meaning to organize, but it's hard to know where to start sometimes." The bedroom wasn't messy at all. It was sparse, almost sterile, with walls the color of old cream and furniture that looked expensive but unloved. A queen-sized bed dominated the center of the room, made with military precision. There were no personal touches, no photographs, no books on the nightstand. It looked like a hotel room where someone had been staying temporarily for years. "How long has it been this color?" I asked, running my hand along the wall to check the paint quality. 15 years, maybe more. My husband chose it when we moved in. He said it was neutral, practical." She paused, and I could hear the weight of memory in her voice. "He passed away 3 years ago." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face her. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. It's been difficult, but I'm finally ready to make some changes, starting with this room." That's when I understood. This wasn't just about paint. This was about reclaiming a space, about making it hers instead of theirs. I'd seen it before with other clients, usually women who were starting over, who needed their homes to reflect who they were becoming, rather than who they'd been. "What color were you thinking?" For the first time since I'd arrived, Maria smiled. "I've been dreaming about this soft lavender color. My grandmother had a bedroom painted that color when I was little, and I always felt so peaceful there. But I don't know if it's too bold, too much." "It's your room, Maria. It should make you happy." That's what my daughter keeps telling me. She lives in Portland now, but she calls every week to check on me. She says I need to start living for myself instead of just existing. I spent the next hour measuring, taking notes, and discussing the details. Maria hovered nearby, asking questions about the process, the timeline, the type of paint I'd use. I could tell she was nervous, like she was making a decision that felt much bigger than choosing a paint color. "I can start Monday morning if that works for you. It should take about 3 days to do it right. 2 coats of primer, 2 coats of paint, and I'll be careful with all the trim work." "Monday sounds perfect. I work at the library downtown, so I'm usually gone by 8 and back around 5. Will you need me here?" "Not necessarily, but I'll need access to the house. Do you have a spare key, or would you prefer to be here when I work?" Maria hesitated. "I think I'd like to be here, at least for part of it. I work part-time now, so I have some flexibility." "Would that be a problem?" "Not at all. Sometimes it's nice to have company." As I packed up my measuring tape and notepad, Maria walked me to the door. "Alex, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm crazy for wanting to change everything after all this time?" I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. There was something vulnerable in her question, something that went beyond paint and decorating. "Maria, I think you're brave. Change is scary, but staying stuck is scarier." She smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. "Thank you. I'll see you Monday morning." Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about Maria and that bedroom. There was something about her that had gotten under my skin, something that made me want to do more than just paint her walls. I wanted to help her transform that space into something that felt like home, something that reflected the woman she was becoming rather than the woman she'd been. That weekend, I found myself thinking about color combinations, about how to make that lavender work with the existing furniture, about little touches that might make the room feel more personal. I even stopped by the hardware store to look at paint samples, something I'd never done on my own time for a client. Jordan noticed my distraction when we met for our usual Sunday morning coffee at Pete's Diner. "You're thinking about something," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Or someone. "Just a job I'm starting tomorrow. Bedroom painting. Bedroom painting, huh? Sounds intimate. It's not like that, Jordan. She's a client, a widow who's ready to make some changes. Uh-huh. And what's she like? I found myself struggling to put Maria into words. She's elegant. Sad, but trying not to be. She's been stuck in the past, and she's finally ready to move forward. Sounds like someone I know. I shot him a look. What's that supposed to mean? Alex, you've been stuck in the past too, ever since Rebecca. Maybe this job is exactly what you both need. I wanted to argue with him, but there was something in what he said that rang true. I had been stuck, not just romantically, but in a lot of ways. I'd been playing it safe, keeping people at arm's length, focusing on work instead of life. Maybe Maria wasn't the only one who needed to make some changes. Monday morning arrived gray and cool, with the promise of rain later in the day. I loaded my truck with drop cloths, brushes, rollers, and 5 gallons of the most beautiful lavender paint I'd ever mixed. I'd spent extra time getting the color just right, adding subtle hints of gray to keep it sophisticated, making sure it would look good in both morning light and evening lamplight. Maria's car was in the driveway when I arrived, and she met me, at the door wearing jeans and an old sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more relaxed than she had during our initial meeting. I called in sick, she said with a conspiratorial smile. I decided I wanted to be here for this. I'm glad. It's your room. You should see it come to life. As I carried my supplies upstairs, I could feel Maria watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that suggested she was genuinely interested in the process. Most clients disappeared once the work started, checking in occasionally, but mostly trusting me to do my job. Maria seemed different. She seemed invested in every step. Can I help with anything? She asked as I began laying out drop cloths. Just talk to me. Tell me about yourself, about this house, about what you're hoping for. And so she did. As I began the careful process of removing switch plates and taping off trim, Maria told me about her life. She'd moved to Cedar Falls 25 years ago, when her husband got a job at the insurance company downtown. She'd worked as a teacher for years before taking the library job, which she loved because it kept her connected to books and learning. She had one daughter, Carmen, who lived across the country but called regularly. She had a small circle of friends, mostly other women her age who were navigating similar transitions. I feel like I've been sleepwalking for the past 3 years, she admitted, as I started rolling primer onto the walls. Just going through the motions, keeping busy, but not really living. What changed? My daughter came to visit last month. She took one look at this room and said, "Mom, this isn't your room. This is a shrine to Dad, and he wouldn't want that." She was right. I've been so afraid of forgetting him that I forgot about myself. There was something powerful about her. Honesty, about the way she was willing to be vulnerable with someone she barely knew. As I worked, I found myself sharing too, telling her about my business, about why I'd left the corporate world, about the satisfaction I found in transformation work. There's something magical about changing a space, I said, stepping back to admire the first coat of primer. It's like giving someone permission to become who they're meant to be. Maria nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. I haven't felt like myself in so long. I'm not sure I remember who that is anymore. I think you're about to find out. The morning flew by, and before I knew it, Maria was offering to make lunch. We sat at her kitchen table, eating sandwiches, and talking about everything and nothing. She asked about my family, my dreams, my fears. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years, sharing stories I usually kept to myself. "You're not what I expected," Maria said, taking a sip of iced tea. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more distant, I guess. More businesslike." "You care about this work in a way that's unusual. I care about people. The work is just how I show it." That afternoon, as I applied the first coat of lavender paint, something shifted in the room. It wasn't just the color, though the lavender was transforming the space in ways that exceeded even my expectations. It was the energy, the sense of possibility, the feeling that something beautiful was being born. Maria sat in the corner chair, reading a book but occasionally looking up to watch my progress. There was something comfortable about her presence, something that made the work feel less like a job and more like a collaboration. Every so often, she'd make a comment about how much she loved the color, how different the room already felt, how excited she was to see the finished result. By the end of the day, the room was completely transformed. The lavender walls seemed to glow in the afternoon light, creating a sense of peace and femininity that had been completely absent before. Maria stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful, Alex. It's absolutely beautiful. It's not finished yet. Tomorrow I'll do the second coat and all the detail work, but it's getting there." "No, you don't understand. For the first time in 3 years, this feels like my room, like a place where I belong." Standing there in that lavender room, watching Maria see herself and her space in a completely new way, I realized that Jordan had been right. This job was changing me too. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing more than just painting walls. I was helping someone reclaim their life, and in the process, I was rediscovering my own. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, streaming through the windows of Maria's house. I'd been looking forward to returning since the moment I left the previous evening, something that rarely happened with client jobs. Usually, work was work, but this felt different. There was something about Maria's genuine excitement about her transformation that made me want to exceed every expectation. I knocked softly on the front door, balancing my coffee and a small bag from the local bakery. Maria answered wearing a bright yellow blouse that seemed to reflect her improved mood from the day before. "You're early," she said with a smile that lit up her entire face. "I brought coffee cake from Sullivan's Bakery. Thought you might enjoy it with your morning coffee." Her eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like gratitude. "You didn't have to do that, Alex. That's so thoughtful." "It's nothing. I figured if you're playing hooky from work again, we might as well make it special." Maria laughed, a sound that seemed to come easier today than it had the day before. "Actually, I called my supervisor and arranged to work from home this week. I can do most of my cataloging and research remotely, and I didn't want to miss seeing this room come together." As we climbed the stairs together, I noticed Maria seemed lighter somehow, like she was carrying less weight on her shoulders. The bedroom looked different in the morning light, the lavender walls warm and inviting rather than the stark cream they'd been just 2 days before. "I couldn't sleep last night," Maria confessed as I began setting up my equipment, but not in a bad way. I kept getting up to look at the walls, to touch them, to make sure this was really happening. Change can be exciting and terrifying at the same time. "Exactly. I keep thinking about what my husband would say about all this." She paused, running her hand along the freshly painted surface. For the longest time, that thought would have stopped me. But yesterday, I realized something. He loved me. He would want me to be happy, even if that means changing things he chose. There was a wisdom in her words that made me stop what I was doing and really look at her. That's a beautiful way to think about it. My daughter helped me see that. Carmen has been trying to get me to redecorate for years, but I always had excuses. Too expensive, too much work, too disrespectful to his memory. But grief isn't about keeping everything exactly the same forever. It's about carrying love forward while still living your own life. As I applied the second coat of paint, Maria settled into her corner chair with her laptop, working on what she explained was a digital catalog system for the library's rare book collection. Every so often, she'd look up from her screen to watch my progress, and we'd fall into easy conversation about everything from books to travel to the changing seasons. "I used to paint when I was younger," Maria mentioned during one of our breaks. "Nothing professional, just watercolors mostly. Landscapes and flowers. I haven't picked up a brush in years." "What made you stop?" She was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Life, I suppose. Marriage, work, responsibilities. You know how it is. The things you love sometimes get pushed aside for the things you have to do. It's never too late to start again." "Is that what you did?" "Started again?" I told her about my corporate days, about feeling trapped in a cubicle, about the moment I realized I was slowly dying inside from the fluorescent lights and endless meetings about meetings. I explained how painting had started as a weekend side job and gradually became my salvation. "Weren't you scared?" Giving up security for something uncertain? Terrified, but I was more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Brave, Maria repeated softly. That's a word I'm still learning to apply to myself. By lunchtime, the second coat was complete and drying beautifully. The lavender seemed to have its own glow, transforming the entire atmosphere of the room. Maria insisted on making lunch again, and we sat in her kitchen discussing the final details for the next day. I've been thinking about the trim work, I said, sketching some ideas on a napkin. What if we painted it a soft white instead of keeping it cream? It would make the lavender pop and give the room a more modern feel. Maria's eyes lit up. Could we really do that? It's your room. We can do whatever makes you happy. I love that idea. Fresh and clean and new. That afternoon, while the walls dried, Maria surprised me by asking if I'd like to see the rest of the house. Most clients kept our interactions limited to the work area, but Maria seemed genuinely interested in sharing her space and her story. The house was a treasure trove of memories and beautiful details. Hand-carved banisters, original hardwood floors, built-in bookcases filled with what looked like a lifetime of reading. But as we walked through each room, I noticed the same pattern I'd seen in the bedroom. Everything was perfectly maintained but felt frozen in time, like a museum exhibit labeled, "How We Used to Live." This was his office, Maria said, opening the door to a room that clearly hadn't been touched since her husband's death. Papers still sat on the desk, reading glasses next to an open book, a coffee mug that probably still held 3-year-old residue. This must be difficult. It is. Carmen keeps suggesting I convert it to something else, maybe a craft room or a reading nook, but I haven't been able to bring myself to change anything in here. There's no timeline for grief, Maria. You'll know when you're ready. Thank you for saying that. Everyone else seems to have opinions about what I should do and when I should do it. We continued the tour, and I began to see the full picture of Maria's life. She was a woman who had defined herself through relationships and roles, wife, mother, teacher, caregiver, and was now trying to figure out who she was when all those external definitions had changed or evolved. In the living room, Maria showed me photo albums filled with family pictures, travel memories, and celebrations. Her face in the older photos was radiant, full of life and laughter. But somewhere along the way, that light had dimmed, replaced by a kind of resigned contentment that looked more like survival than joy. You were happy, I observed, looking at a picture of Maria and her husband dancing at what looked like a wedding. I was. We both were. But life has a way of wearing you down, doesn't it? Bills and worries and trying to keep everyone else happy. Somewhere along the way, I forgot about keeping myself happy. And now I'm trying to remember what that even means. That evening, as I cleaned my brushes and prepared to leave, Maria walked me to the door as she had the day before. But this time, there was something different in her demeanor. She seemed more confident, more present. Alex, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you happy? With your life, your choices, your work? The question caught me off guard. Most people asked about my business or my schedule or my rates. No one ever asked about my happiness. I am. Maybe not in the way people expect happiness to look, but yes, I'm doing work I love. I'm helping people. I'm building something meaningful. That feels like happiness to me. I envy that. I'm not sure I've ever felt that confident about my choices. You're making confident choices now. This room, these changes, they're all choices that honor who you're becoming. I hope so. Sometimes I feel like I'm just stumbling around in the dark, hoping I don't break anything important. Maria, can I tell you something? From what I've seen over the past 2 days, you're not stumbling. You're walking deliberately towards something better. That takes courage. Wednesday brought rain, but it didn't dampen the energy in Maria's bedroom. The trim work went smoothly, each careful brush stroke adding definition and elegance to the space. Maria had taken my suggestion about the white trim, and the contrast with the lavender walls was stunning. It's like a completely different room, Maria said, standing in the doorway with her hands clasped in front of her heart. It's the same room. You just gave it permission to be beautiful. Is that what you think I needed? Permission? I stopped painting and looked at her seriously. I think you've always been beautiful, Maria. You just needed to be reminded. Something shifted in the air between us in that moment. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it was intimate in a way that surprised us both. Maria's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked away, but not before I saw something flicker in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I should let you work, she said softly, retreating to her chair. But the energy in the room had changed. There was an awareness now, a recognition that what was happening between us went beyond a simple business transaction. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, both of us processing this new dynamic. Around midday, Jordan showed up unexpectedly, claiming he was in the neighborhood and thought he'd check on my progress. But I knew Jordan well enough to recognize a reconnaissance mission when I saw one. "You must be Maria," Jordan said with his characteristic charm, extending his hand. "I'm Jordan, Alex's best friend and unofficial quality control supervisor." Maria laughed, shaking his hand warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Jordan. Alex has mentioned you." "All good things, I hope. So what do you think of our guy's work? He's pretty talented, isn't he?" I shot Jordan a warning look, but he ignored it completely, launching into what I recognized as his standard Alex promotion speech. He told Maria about my attention to detail, my artistic eye, my dedication to customer satisfaction. It was embarrassing and endearing at the same time. "He's been wonderful," Maria said, glancing at me with something that looked like affection. I had no idea how much thought and care went into this kind of work. "Alex doesn't just paint walls," Jordan continued, clearly enjoying himself. "He transforms spaces. He helps people see possibilities they didn't know existed." "Jordan," I warned, but Maria was smiling. "He's right, you know. You've helped me see this room, and maybe myself, in a completely different way." After Jordan left, with promises to see the finished result and several meaningful looks in my direction, Maria and I fell back into our easy rhythm, but something had shifted. Jordan's visit had highlighted the connection that was developing between us, made it more visible, and therefore more real. "Your friend cares about you," Maria observed as I worked on the final section of trim. "Jordan thinks I need more people in my life. Do you? I used to think I was fine on my own. Now I'm not so sure. Change has a way of making us question everything, doesn't it?" That afternoon, as I applied the final touches to the trim work, Maria made an announcement that surprised me. "I've decided to redecorate the entire house." I paused, brush in mid-air. The entire house? Not all at once, obviously, but room by room, gradually. Starting with the living room next month, if you're available. "Maria, that's a big decision." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. For the first time in years, I'm absolutely sure about something. This room has shown me what's possible. I want the whole house to feel this way." "What way?" "Like mine. Like home. Like a place where I can be myself instead of who I used to be." There was something profound in her declaration, a sense of a woman finally claiming her own life. And there was something equally profound in the realization that I wanted to be part of that journey. "I'd be honored to help you with that." "Good. Because I can't imagine trusting anyone else with something this important." As the day wound down and the final coat of paint dried to perfection, Maria and I stood together in her transformed bedroom. The lavender walls seemed to glow with their own inner light, the white trim crisp and clean, the entire space radiating peace and femininity and hope. "It's perfect, Alex. It's absolutely perfect." "How does it feel, being in your own space, for the first time?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, looking around the room with wonder. "It feels like coming home to myself." That evening, as I packed up my equipment for the final time, I realized that something had shifted in me too. This job had started as a simple painting project, but it had become something much more significant. I'd watched a woman rediscover her own beauty and strength, and in the process, I'd begun to question my own assumptions about connection and isolation. Thank you, Alex, for everything. For the beautiful work, for the kindness, for helping me remember who I am. Thank you for trusting me with something so important. Will I see you again? Before the living room project, I mean? There was something hopeful in her question. Something that suggested she was thinking about me beyond my role as her painter. Would you like to? See me again, I mean? I would. Very much. Standing there in her transformed bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of positive change and new possibilities, I realized that Maria wasn't the only one being transformed. This job, this woman, this unexpected connection had opened something in me that I'd been keeping carefully closed. How about dinner? Tomorrow night? Somewhere that's not your house or a work site? I'd love that. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the look in Maria's eyes when she'd said yes to dinner. It was the same look she'd had when she first saw her lavender walls, a mix of excitement and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite trust that something this good was really happening to her. I called Jordan from my truck. How did it go today? He answered on the first ring. I asked her to dinner. And? She said yes. I knew it. I could see it in the way she looked at you today. Alex, this is good. This is really good. I think you're right. For the first time in a long time, I think you're right. Just promise me you won't overthink this. You deserve someone who sees your value, and from what I could tell today, Maria definitely sees it. That night, as I lay in bed thinking about lavender walls and genuine smiles and the possibility of something new and unexpected, I realized that home renovation wasn't just about changing spaces. Sometimes it was about changing lives, including your own. Our first dinner together at Romano's, a cozy Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town, felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Maria arrived wearing a soft green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, and I found myself nervous in a way I hadn't been since high school. We talked easily about books and travel dreams, about her work at the library, and my plans for expanding the business. There was something effortless about being with her, like we'd known each other for years instead of days. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Maria confessed over dessert, her spoon tracing patterns in her tiramisu. This all feels too good to be real. What if it is real? What if good things are allowed to happen to you? She smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. I've spent so many years expecting disappointment that I'm not sure I know how to expect anything else. That conversation stayed with me for days. The idea that someone as remarkable as Maria had been conditioned to expect so little from life bothered me more than I wanted to admit. It made me want to show her that she deserved better, that happiness wasn't something she had to apologize for wanting. We fell into a comfortable rhythm over the following weeks. I would stop by after work sometimes, ostensibly to check on how the bedroom was holding up, but really just to see her. We'd sit in her kitchen drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. Maria would tell me about difficult patrons at the library or share stories about calls with her daughter Carmen. I'd update her on various jobs and complain good-naturedly about Jordan's relentless matchmaking attempts. But underneath the easy companionship, there were complications brewing that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The age difference, while not enormous, felt significant in a town like Cedar Falls, where people noticed everything and commented on most of it. Maria was established, sophisticated, a respected member of the community. I was still building my reputation, still figuring out my place in the world. The first real challenge came when we ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. Mrs. Patterson had taught both Maria and me at different times, though she was retired now, and spent most of her energy monitoring the social dynamics of our small town with the dedication of an investigative journalist. "Maria, dear, how lovely to see you," Mrs. Patterson said, her sharp eyes immediately moving to where I stood beside Maria's cart. "And Alex, isn't it? The painter?" "That's right. Mrs. Patterson, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm well. Just surprised to see you two together. Shopping for a project, I assume?" There was something in her tone that made my stomach tighten. Maria's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, and I could see her slipping back into that careful, measured version of herself that I'd come to recognize as her defensive mode. "Alex did beautiful work on my bedroom," Maria said evenly. "We were just discussing some future projects." "I see. Well, isn't that nice?" After Mrs. Patterson moved on, Maria was quiet for the rest of our shopping trip. I could practically see her retreating building walls I thought we'd already torn down. "Hey," I said gently as we loaded groceries into her car. "Don't let her get to you." "I'm not. It's just people talk, Alex. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of attention." "What kind of attention?" "The kind where people dissect my choices and judge whether I'm moving on too quickly or not quickly enough or with the right kind of person." That last phrase hit me like a physical blow. "The right kind of person?" Maria sighed, leaning against her car. "You know what I mean. I'm a librarian with a master's degree and a house on Maple Street. You're a painter who works with his hands. People have opinions about these things. And what's your opinion?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the internal struggle playing out in her expression. "My opinion is that I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you. But my opinion might not be enough." The conversation haunted me for days. I found myself wondering if Maria was right, if the differences between us were too significant to overcome in a place like Cedar Falls. I'd grown up here. I knew how people thought, how quickly judgment could spread and how hard it was to escape once the town had made up its mind about you. Jordan, predictably, had strong opinions when I shared my concerns with him over beers at Murphy's Tavern. "Alex, you're being an idiot. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. You're letting other people's possible opinions dictate your actual happiness. Since when do you care what Mrs. Patterson thinks about anything? It's not about me, it's about Maria. She's lived here longer, she has more to lose. Or maybe she's using that as an excuse because she's scared. Scared of what?" "Same thing you're scared of. Getting hurt again. Taking a real risk on something that matters." Jordan had a point, but that didn't make the situation any easier to navigate. The uncertainty was affecting my work, my sleep, my ability to focus on anything that wasn't Maria, and the growing complications of our relationship. Things came to a head the following week, when Maria's daughter Carmen made an unexpected visit. I was at Maria's house, installing new light fixtures in her kitchen, when a car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched a woman who looked like a younger version of Maria emerge from a rental car, moving with the determined energy of someone on a mission. "That's Carmen," Maria said, her voice tight with anxiety. "She wasn't supposed to be here until next month." Carmen knocked once and then let herself in, as daughters do. She was probably in her late 20s, with Maria's dark hair and intelligent eyes, but with an edge of urban sophistication that spoke of life in a bigger city. "Mom, I was worried sick when you didn't answer your phone last night, so I hopped on the first flight this morning." She stopped when she saw me standing there with a screwdriver in my hand. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Carmen, this is Alex. He's been helping me with some renovations. Alex, this is my daughter, Carmen." Carmen's handshake was firm, her assessment immediate and thorough. "Nice to meet you, Alex. Mom's told me about the beautiful work you did on her bedroom. It's nice to meet you too. Your mother talks about you all the time. All good things, I hope." There was something in Carmen's tone that suggested this conversation was just beginning. "Mom, could we talk privately for a minute?" I made my excuses and retreated to my truck, but I could hear raised voices through the kitchen window. Not angry voices, but intense ones. Carmen was clearly concerned about something, and Maria was clearly defensive. I couldn't make out specific words, but the emotional undertones were unmistakable. 20 minutes later, Maria emerged from the house looking shaken. She approached my truck with the careful walk of someone trying to maintain composure. "I'm sorry about that. Carmen can be protective. Everything okay?" "She's worried about me, about the changes I've been making, about moving too fast, about—" She gestured vaguely in my direction. "About me. About us. About whether I'm thinking clearly or just rebounding from grief in an unhealthy way." The words stung, partly because they echoed my own fears. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that for the first time in years, I feel like I'm thinking clearly about everything." "Do you believe that?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, looking back at the house where her daughter waited. "I want to." But Carmen raised some points that I can't ignore. Such as the fact that I barely know you. Such as the fact that we come from different worlds, such as the fact that everyone in town is already talking about the widow who's taken up with her painter. Are we taken up? I don't know what we are, Alex. That's part of the problem. The uncertainty in her voice was like a door closing. I could feel her slipping away, retreating back into the safety of caution and other people's expectations. Maria, I can't compete with your daughter's concerns or the town's opinions. But I can tell you that what I feel for you is real. And I think what you feel for me is real too. Real doesn't always mean right. Who gets to decide what's right? You, Carmen, Mrs. Patterson? Or do you get to decide what makes you happy? She didn't answer, but I could see the struggle in her eyes. Part of her wanted to fight for this, for us. But part of her was already surrendering to the voices telling her to be practical, to be careful, to be small. I need some time to think, she said finally. How much time? I don't know. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the walls I'd painted 3 years ago when I first moved in. They were a safe, neutral beige that offended no one and inspired nothing. Looking at them now, I understood why Maria had been so excited about her lavender bedroom. Color was a choice, a statement, a declaration that you had opinions about your own life. Sam called around 9, his voice cheerful and oblivious to my mood. Hey man, how's the romance going? Jordan said you were smitten with some classy lady. It's complicated. Isn't it always? What's the problem? I found myself explaining the whole situation to Sam, from the initial spark to Carmen's unexpected visit to Maria's request for time to think. Sam listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. You know what your problem is? He said when I finished. I'm sure you're going to tell me. You're letting everyone else write the story, the daughter, the neighbors, even Maria to some extent. But this is your story too, Alex. You get a say in how it goes. What's that supposed to mean? It means stop waiting for permission to be happy. Stop apologizing for who you are and what you do for a living. You're a good man with a good heart who does honest work. If that's not enough for some people, that's their loss. After Sam hung up, I sat thinking about his words. He was right about one thing. I had been waiting for permission, not just from Maria, but from the whole town. I'd been so concerned about whether I was good enough for her that I'd forgotten to consider whether she was right for me. The next few days passed slowly. I threw myself into work, finishing a bathroom renovation for the Hendersons and starting a kitchen cabinet job for a young couple on the other side of town. But everywhere I went, I found myself thinking about Maria, wondering what she was deciding, whether Carmen was still in town influencing those decisions. Jordan stopped by the job site on Thursday with coffee and unsolicited advice. You look terrible, he announced cheerfully. Thanks. Just what I needed to hear. Have you talked to her? She asked for time to think. I'm giving her time to think. How much time? I don't know. However much she needs. Jordan shook his head. Alex, sometimes people get so lost in thinking that they forget to feel. Maybe she needs a reminder of what she's thinking about. What do you mean? I mean, maybe she needs to see that you're not going anywhere, that you're willing to fight for this. She knows how I feel. Does she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're giving up pretty easily. That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of waiting for Maria to figure out her feelings, I decided to do something that might help clarify them for both of us. I drove to the flower shop on Main Street and bought the most beautiful bouquet of lavender roses I could find. Then I drove to Maria's house, my heart pounding with nervous energy. Carmen answered the door, her expression immediately wary when she saw me standing there with flowers. She's not ready to see you, Carmen said without preamble. I'm not here to pressure her. I just want her to know that I'm thinking about her. Carmen studied me for a long moment, her protective instincts clearly at war with something else. You really care about her, don't you? I do. She's been hurt before, you know. Not just by my father's death, but before that. She spent years making herself smaller so other people would be comfortable. I don't want to see her do that again. I don't want her to be smaller. I want her to be exactly who she is. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because Carmen stepped aside and called for her mother. Maria appeared a moment later, her eyes widening when she saw me standing there with lavender roses. "I thought you might like these," I said simply. "To match your bedroom." Maria took the flowers with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. "They're beautiful, Alex. So are you. And I'm not going anywhere, Maria. Not because of Carmen's concerns or the town's opinions or your own fears. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Carmen watched this exchange with growing understanding, and I saw her expression soften as she realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the threat to her mother's happiness that she'd imagined. Maybe I was exactly the opposite. The lavender roses sat in a crystal vase on Maria's kitchen table, their soft petals catching the afternoon light that streamed through her windows. Carmen had agreed to stay for dinner, and the three of us found ourselves in the unexpected position of getting to know each other under circumstances none of us had planned for. "So Alex," Carmen said, cutting into her chicken with surgical precision, "tell me about your business. Mom says you're very talented, but I'd like to hear your perspective." I recognized the interview for what it was, a daughter's careful evaluation of the man who had captured her mother's attention. "I started Cedar Falls Painting about 5 years ago after leaving a corporate job that was slowly killing my soul. I specialize in residential work, mostly interior painting and minor renovations. Nothing too complicated, but I take pride in helping people transform their spaces into something that feels like home." "And you enjoy it? The physical labor, I mean?" There was something in her tone that made me pause. "I do. There's something honest about working with your hands, about seeing immediate results from your effort. I know it's not glamorous work, but it's meaningful to me." Carmen nodded slowly, and I could see her processing this information alongside whatever preconceptions she might have had. "I work in marketing for a tech company in Portland. Very different world. Sometimes I think I spend more time in meetings about work than actually working." "Carmen's being modest," Maria interjected. "She's the youngest marketing director in her company's history. She's incredibly successful." "Success means different things to different people," Carmen said, glancing meaningfully at her mother. "I've been so focused on climbing ladders and meeting expectations that I sometimes forget what actually makes me happy." The conversation continued through dinner, gradually shifting from interrogation to genuine curiosity. Carmen asked about my family, my goals, my thoughts on everything from local politics to climate change. But underneath the polite exchange, I could sense a deeper evaluation taking place. She was trying to determine not just who I was, but whether I was worthy of her mother's newfound happiness. After dinner, Carmen excused herself to make some work calls, leaving Maria and me alone for the first time since her daughter's arrival. We cleared the dishes in comfortable silence, but I could feel the weight of unspoken conversations hanging between us. "She likes you," Maria said finally, handing me a plate to dry. "How can you tell?" "She stopped asking questions designed to make you uncomfortable and started asking questions because she was actually interested in your answers." "And what about you? How are you feeling about all this?" Maria paused, her hands still in the soapy water. Confused, scared, hopeful. Sometimes all at the same time. "That sounds about right. Carmen thinks I'm rushing into something I'm not ready for. She's worried I'm substituting you for the grief work I should be doing." "Are you?" "I don't know. How do you know the difference between healing and avoiding? Between moving forward and running away?" It was a question I'd been asking myself since we started getting closer. "Maybe you don't know. Maybe you just have to trust your instincts and be willing to course correct if necessary." "My instincts have been dormant for so long, I'm not sure I can trust them." That night, after Carmen had gone to her hotel and I'd returned to my apartment, I found myself unable to sleep. The conversation with Maria had highlighted something I'd been trying to ignore. The possibility that our connection, as real as it felt to me, might be more complicated for her than I'd understood. I called Sam, knowing he'd still be awake despite the late hour. "Let me guess," he said without preamble. "You're overthinking the woman's situation. Carmen thinks Maria might be rebounding. Carmen doesn't know her mother's heart any better than you do. Maybe better than Maria does right now, but that's not saying much." What if she's right, though? What if I'm just a convenient distraction from grief? Then you'll figure it out together. Alex, you can't protect yourself from every possible disappointment. Sometimes you just have to jump and trust that the net will appear. When did you become so wise about relationships? Since I watched my best friend fall for someone who might actually be good for him. Don't screw this up by being too careful. The next morning brought unexpected drama when I arrived at the Hendersons' house to finish their bathroom renovation. Mrs. Henderson, who had always been friendly and professional, greeted me with a cool politeness that immediately put me on alert. "Good morning, Alex. I trust you'll be able to finish up today?" "That's the plan. Just need to install the new vanity and touch up the paint around the fixtures." "Good. We have some friends coming to visit this weekend, and I'd prefer to have everything completed." There was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't really about weekend visitors. As I worked, I could hear her on the phone in the next room, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch fragments of conversation. "Well, I think it's inappropriate, frankly. She's barely been widowed 3 years, and now she's carrying on with the painter. It doesn't look right." My hands stilled on the wrench I was holding. The conversation continued, each word feeling like a small cut. "I'm not saying he's not a nice young man. But really, what do they have in common? She's an educated woman, with standing in this community. He's a laborer." The word laborer hung in the air like an accusation. I'd heard it before, usually from people who believed that the value of work could be measured by the cleanliness of your hands at the end of the day. But hearing it applied to my relationship with Maria felt different, more personal. I finished the job in record time, packed my tools with mechanical efficiency, and left without the usual pleasantries. Mrs. Henderson's check was waiting on the kitchen counter with a note thanking me for my work and wishing me well in my future endeavors. The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Driving to my next job, I found myself questioning everything. Was I being naive about the obstacles Maria and I would face? Was I putting her in an impossible position by pursuing a relationship that might damage her reputation in the community she'd called home for decades? The doubt followed me through the rest of the day, affecting my work and my mood. By evening, I was exhausted not from physical labor, but from the mental gymnastics of trying to navigate a situation that felt increasingly complicated. I was surprised when Maria called around 8 o'clock, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Alex, we need to talk. Can you come over?" "Of course. Is everything okay? Just come over. Please." The drive to Maria's house felt longer than usual, my mind racing through possible scenarios. When she answered the door, I could see immediately that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a fragility in her posture that reminded me of how she'd looked that first day when I'd met her in the bedroom that needed painting. "What's wrong?" "Come in. Sit down." We settled in her living room, the same space where we'd shared so many comfortable conversations. But tonight, the atmosphere was charged with tension and unresolved conflict. "Carmen left this morning," Maria began, her voice carefully controlled. But before she left, she said some things that I can't stop thinking about. "Such as?" "She thinks I'm using you as a way to avoid dealing with my grief. She thinks I'm being selfish, pursuing something that makes me happy without considering the consequences for either of us. And what do you think?" I think she might be right. The words hit me like a physical blow. "About which part?" "About all of it. Alex, I've been so caught up in feeling good again that I haven't stopped to consider what this relationship might cost you. Or me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Mrs. Henderson called me today to cancel her library volunteer commitment. She said she felt it would be inappropriate to work closely with me given my current circumstances." I felt my stomach drop. "Maria, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "That's not the only call I got. Apparently our dinner at Romano's didn't go unnoticed, and people have opinions about my choices." "What kind of opinions?" "The kind that suggest I'm disrespecting my husband's memory. The kind that question whether I'm thinking clearly. The kind that wonder what a woman like me could possibly want with a man like you." Each word felt like a slap. A man like me. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. Why don't you explain it to me? Maria's composure cracked slightly. Don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not making anything hard. I'm asking you to be honest about what you're really saying. Fine. You want honesty? People think I'm having some kind of midlife crisis, that I'm rebounding with someone inappropriate because I'm not thinking clearly. And you're starting to believe them. I don't know what I believe anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Maria retreating again, building walls that I wasn't sure I had the energy to climb anymore. Let me ask you something, I said finally. When you're with me, how do you feel? Alex, that's not the point. It's exactly the point. When we're talking in your kitchen, when we're laughing about something ridiculous, when you're showing me your favorite books or telling me about your dreams, how do you feel? She was quiet for a long moment, tears flowing freely now. I feel like myself, like the person I was before I learned to be careful about everything. And that's wrong because other people don't approve. It's not that simple, isn't it? Maria stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over her carefully maintained garden. You don't understand the position I'm in. I've lived in this town for 25 years. I have a reputation, relationships, responsibilities. I can't just ignore what people think. I'm not asking you to ignore anything. I'm asking you to decide what matters more. What other people think about your life or what you think about your life. That's easy for you to say. You're young, you're male, you can start over anywhere. I'm 52 years old, Alex. I don't have the luxury of not caring what people think. The luxury? The words came out sharper than I intended. You think not caring about other people's opinions is a luxury? Isn't it? I stood up, suddenly understanding the full scope of the gulf between us. No, Maria. It's not a luxury. It's a choice. And it's one that every person has to make for themselves, regardless of age or gender or social position. You're oversimplifying. I'm not oversimplifying anything. I'm telling you that you get to choose who you are and who you want to be with, but you have to actually choose. You can't have both the approval of people who think you should stay safely in your widow box and the happiness that comes from taking risks on something real. Maria turned from the window, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes flashing with something that looked like anger. Don't you dare lecture me about choices. You have no idea what it's like to rebuild your entire identity after losing someone you loved for 30 years. You have no idea what it's like to be judged for every decision by people who think they know what's best for you. You're right. I don't know what that's like. But I know what it's like to care about someone who's so afraid of making the wrong choice that she's paralyzed into making no choice at all. That's not fair. Neither is asking me to wait indefinitely while you decide whether I'm worth the social inconvenience. The words hung between us like a challenge. Maria stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing not just what I'd said, but the implications of the conversation we were having. Maybe Carmen was right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I'm not ready for this. Maybe she was, or maybe you're just scared. Of course I'm scared, I'm terrified. Of what exactly? Of making a mistake, of getting hurt, of hurting you, of wasting whatever time we might have had together by wanting too much too soon. Maria, what if the biggest mistake is not taking the risk? What if the thing you should be most afraid of is spending the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to find out? She didn't answer, but I could see the internal battle playing out in her expression. Fear warring with hope. Caution fighting against desire, the weight of other people's expectations crushing down on her own instincts. I need to ask you something, she said finally. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you really see a future with me? Not just the excitement of something new, not just the satisfaction of helping someone through a difficult transition, but a real future? The question caught me off guard with its directness. Yes, I do. Even with all the complications? The age difference? The social pressure? The baggage I carry from my marriage? Especially with all the complications. Maria, I don't want to date some idealized version of you that exists without history or challenges. I want to be with the real you, complicated baggage and all. She studied my face as if she were trying to memorize it. And what would that look like? This future, you imagine? I don't know all the details, but I know it would involve us choosing each other every day, regardless of what other people think about that choice. I know it would involve building something together that's ours, not theirs. And I know it would involve you finally believing that you deserve to be happy. Maria was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching mine for something I couldn't identify. Finally she spoke, her voice so soft I had to strain to hear her. I want to believe that. I want to believe I deserve happiness, that this connection we have is real, that love can happen twice in one lifetime. But I'm afraid that wanting it isn't enough. I'm afraid that I'm too damaged, too set in my ways, too concerned with what other people think to be the kind of partner you deserve. That's not your decision to make. What do you mean? Whether I deserve better, whether you're too damaged, whether this is worth the effort, those aren't your decisions to make. They're mine. And I've already made them. Something shifted in Maria's expression, a crack in the wall she'd been building between us. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Maria. Not the woman you think you should be, not the woman other people expect you to be, but the woman you are right. Now in this moment, scared and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. The words hung in the air between us, and I could see their impact in the way Maria's breath caught, in the way her hand flew to her chest as if to still her racing heart. Alex, she whispered. And in that single word I heard surprise and fear and hope all tangled together. You don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide about us, whatever choice you make about your future, I needed you to know that you are loved. Completely, imperfectly, and without reservation. Maria sat down heavily, as if the weight of my words had made it impossible to keep standing. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks, but for the first time since this conversation began, they didn't look like tears of fear or frustration. I love you too, she said finally, her voice breaking on the words. And that terrifies me more than anything else that's happened in the past 3 years. Why? Because loving you means admitting that I want things I thought I was too old to want. It means believing I deserve a second chance at happiness. It means being brave enough to build something new instead of just preserving something old. And you're not sure you can do that? I'm not sure of anything anymore. But I know that I don't want to lose you because I was too afraid to find out. 3 months later, I stood in Maria's living room, carefully rolling warm sage green, paint across the walls that had been beige for over 2 decades. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the room but in Maria herself. She sat curled up in her favorite chair, reading a book about watercolor techniques, occasionally looking up to watch my progress with a contentment I'd never seen in her before. I still can't believe we're doing this, she said, marking her place with a finger and smiling at me. Having second thoughts about the color? Not about the color, about any of it. Sometimes I wake up and can't believe I found the courage to choose happiness. The weeks following our tearful confession had been a mixture of challenges and small victories. Maria had made the decision to stop letting other people's opinions dictate her choices, but that didn't mean the opinions stopped coming. Mrs. Patterson still pursed her lips when she saw us together at the farmer's market. Mrs. Henderson had indeed canceled her library volunteer work, though she'd been replaced by 3 younger women who were delighted to help Maria reorganize the children's section. But for every person who disapproved, there seemed to be 2 who offered quiet support. The librarian from the next town over had stopped by to tell Maria how much she admired her courage. Mr. Jenkins from the hardware store had started giving me a knowing wink whenever I bought paint, claiming he could tell when a man was working on a labor of love rather than just a job. Most importantly, Carmen had called 3 weeks after her visit to apologize. She'd been wrestling with her own assumptions about grief and healing, she explained, and had realized that her fear of seeing her mother hurt again had made her overly protective. I want you to be happy, Mom, she'd said during a video call. That included both of us. And Alex, I can see that you make her happy in a way I haven't seen in years. I'm sorry for making this harder than it needed to be. Now, as I watched Maria in her sage green living room, surrounded by the watercolor supplies she'd finally allowed herself to buy, I marveled at the transformation. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with. Confident and creative, and unafraid to take up space in her own life. "Jordan's bringing Emily tonight for dinner, isn't he?" Maria asked, referring to the woman Jordan had been dating for the past month. "He is, and Sam's coming too. I hope you're prepared for an evening of terrible jokes and excessive laughter. I'm looking forward to it. I like your friends. They adore you. Sam keeps asking when you're going to start painting again so he can commission something for his apartment." Maria laughed, the sound filling the room like music. "Maybe I will. I've been thinking about it more and more." That evening, as our small group gathered around Maria's dining table, I realized how naturally she'd integrated into my life and I into hers. Jordan regaled us with stories from the bank while Emily, a teacher at the elementary school, compared notes with Maria about working with the public. Sam kept everyone entertained with his ongoing attempts to renovate his bathroom using YouTube, tutorials, and sheer determination. To new beginnings, Jordan raised his glass of wine in a toast. And to people brave enough to pursue them. To love that shows up when you least expect it, Emily added. To friends who don't let you hide from your own happiness, Sam contributed. Maria looked at me across the table, her eyes bright with tears and joy. To second chances, she said, softly. And to the people who help us believe we deserve them. Later that night, after our friends had left and we'd finished cleaning up, Maria and I sat on her porch swing, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of peaceful that comes when the day's work is done and the world feels manageable again. "Alex," Maria said, her voice thoughtful, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what you said that night, about deserving happiness. I realize now that I spent so many years believing I had to earn love, that I had to be perfect enough or good enough or grateful enough to justify someone caring about me. And now? Now I'm starting to understand that love isn't something you earn. It's something you accept, something you choose to believe in, even when it scares you." I pulled her closer, feeling the solid warmth of her against my side. "You're right. Love is a choice we make every day. I choose you," she said simply. "Every day. Despite the complications and the gossip and my own fears. I choose us. Even when I track paint through your clean house? Especially then." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. I thought about how much had changed since that first day when I'd come to paint her bedroom, how a simple home improvement project had turned into the most important relationship of my life. "Maria? Do you remember what you said that first day I finished your bedroom? About feeling like you were coming home to yourself?" "I remember. I feel the same way now, like I've been looking for home my whole life and found it with you." She turned in my arms to look at me, her face soft in the glow from the porch light. "You know what the funny thing is? I was so worried about what other people would think about us that I almost missed the most important thing. Which was that for the first time in my adult life, someone saw me exactly as I am and thought I was enough. Not too much, not too little. Just enough." I cupped her face in my hands, marveling at the trust I saw in her eyes. "You're more than enough. Maria, you're everything." The next morning, I woke up in Maria's guest room, an arrangement we'd settled on that satisfied both her sense of propriety and our desire to spend more time together. The smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes drifted up from the kitchen, along with the sound of Maria humming to herself. I found her at the stove, wearing a paint-splattered apron over her pajamas, flipping pancakes with the focused attention she brought to everything she cared about. "Good morning, beautiful." She turned to smile at me, and I was struck again by how radiant she looked. "Good morning. I made extra because I thought we might want to take some to Sam. He mentioned yesterday that his kitchen renovation isn't going well enough to include actual cooking. You're going to spoil him. I like taking care of people I love. It's one of my favorite things about myself that I'd forgotten for a while." After breakfast, we loaded up my truck with painting supplies and leftover pancakes and headed to Sam's apartment. He lived in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of industrial space that looked cool but presented interesting challenges when it came to home improvement. "Maria, you angel," Sam said when we appeared at his door with food and offers of help. I was about to resort to cereal for breakfast again, Show us this bathroom disaster, Maria said with the confidence of someone who'd learned not to be afraid of transformation projects. The next few hours were filled with laughter and teamwork as we helped Sam tackle his bathroom renovation. Maria turned out to have an excellent eye for color and design, suggesting changes that turned Sam's chaotic project into something that actually looked intentional. You two are a good team, Sam observed as Maria held trim pieces while I painted behind them. You balance each other out. What do you mean? I asked. Alex, you're all about the technical stuff, making sure everything's done right. Maria's about the vision, seeing what something could become. Together, you create magic. That evening, as we sat in Maria's newly sage-green living room, I realized Sam was right. We did balance each other out. Maria challenged me to think beyond the mechanics of home improvement to consider the emotional impact of the spaces we created. I helped her trust that her visions could become reality with enough patience and skill. I have something to tell. You, Maria said, setting down the watercolor painting she'd been working on. Good news or concerning news? Good news, I think. I've decided to take early retirement from the library. I set down my book, giving her my full attention. Really? That's a big decision. I want to start painting again. Seriously this time. Maybe take some classes, set up a proper studio in Richard's old office. I've been thinking about it since we started working on Sam's place today. How do you feel about it? Terrified and excited in equal measure, but mostly excited. Then I think it's perfect. There's more. I was thinking we could turn the garage into a workshop for you too. A proper space where you could take on bigger projects, maybe even start teaching other people about home renovation. The idea took my breath away. You'd want me to work from here? I'd want you to live here. With me. If you're interested. I stared at her for a moment, making sure I'd heard correctly. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. A real life. Not just stolen moments between other obligations. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight against my chest. Yes. Yes to all of it. 6 months later, I stood in what had once been Richard's office, now transformed into Maria's art studio, watching her put the finishing touches on a watercolor landscape. Her hair was pulled back with a paintbrush. There were streaks of cerulean blue on her cheek, and she looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. It's finished, she announced, stepping back to admire her work. The painting was gorgeous, all soft washes of color that captured the feeling of a spring morning. But what made it truly beautiful was the confidence in every brushstroke, the fearlessness of someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. It's incredible, Maria. You should be proud. I am proud. And you know what else? I am? What? Happy. Genuinely. Completely happy. That night, as we lay in bed in our lavender bedroom, Maria curled against my side in the darkness, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. It had started with a simple painting job and a woman who needed to change more than just the color of her walls. Alex? Maria's voice was soft with approaching sleep. Yeah? Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For being patient while I figured out how to be brave. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair and the faint smell of paint that seemed to follow her everywhere now. Thank you for letting me love you. Even when I made it difficult? Especially then. In the morning, there would be new projects to tackle, new rooms to transform, new challenges to face together. But tonight, wrapped in the peace of a life we'd chosen deliberately and courageously, everything felt exactly as it should be. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the simplest decisions. To be open to change, to trust in love, and to believe that happiness is something worth fighting for, regardless of what anyone else might think. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.